What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, the Young Noodler. Today, we're going to be talking about the SMG meta in Season 4 of Black Ops Cold War. And we're going to talk about the stats and what makes the good guns good and the bad guns bad. And then we're going to focus on the good guns specifically and what stats can be improved upon with the recommended builds and the recommended attachments. So, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so here we go. Here we're getting right into the nitty gritty. So here are the stats that Treyarch provides in Cold War for every single one of the SMGs. Here's all the SMGs and here's all the stats that they break out. And so this TTK is provided by me, and we'll go over that here in a sec. But here's all the stats. If you guys want to interpret it how you want, pause the video right here. You can do that. But we're going to interpret it together here down below. And one more thing before we move down, you guys got to understand that Cold War and Warzone are completely different. Raven Software is working on Warzone. Treyarch is working on Cold War. So if there's a gun that you guys love in Warzone or that you hate in Warzone, it's not going to translate into this. The guns with great TTKs, the guns with great ranges, the guns with sucky ranges, the guns with great movement speed, that's all going to change. Okay, so what you know about Warzone, don't let it translate into Cold War because they are different stats. And guns are better and worse at range, and we'll see that. So scrolling down, here we go. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start off with what I consider the most important stat, and that's the TTK. So to get to this TTK, let's talk about damage. Damage in itself means very little because you could have a gun that does 149 damage, but if it takes a second between fire rates, you know, if it's a really good sniper at 149 damage, think about the K-Swiss. If it takes a long time, it's going to have a horrible TTK. Okay, so 149 damage means nothing because most people have 150 health. Also, fire rate in itself means very little because it could shoot a billion bullets in a millisecond. But if it's doing, I don't know, 1/1000th of a damage, that means nothing. And so really what you got to do is use damage and fire rate together to figure out the TTK. And this is what matters. This is what you guys want to pay attention to. Is this TTK. And so as you guys can go across, you guys can see, just so you know, the green are the good, the red is the bad, and the yellow and oranges and light greens are in the middle. So this KSB has the best TTK by far, is 315 milliseconds. And so you guys might be thinking, wow, okay, there it is. Turn the video off. That's meta. That's what I'm going to go use. But as we know, it's a 3-round burst. So if you miss even one bullet out of these 3 rounds, and it doesn't have tons of recoil, it actually has really manageable recoil, besides a little bit of horizontal recoil, so you might miss a bullet. But if you miss maybe your whole first 3 bursts, it's going to take 315 milliseconds to get back on track. And so you're going to miss 315 and then it's going to hit 315. So your actual TTK will be 630 if you miss even one bullet, making it easily the worst out of all of these. So it's a really high risk, high reward. I hate the gun, to be honest. A lot of people are decent with it, and that's why you guys sometimes get melted. But personally, I hate it because if you miss one bullet, it's game over. But moving on, the MAC-10 has a really good TTK. It's offset by this super high recoil, which we'll talk about. And then things kind of average out at the end. The guns with the worst TTKs are the PPSH, the Bullfrog, and then the Milano. The Milano has almost no redeeming qualities. I hate it. It's a really crappy gun. It's maybe my least favorite gun. So there you go. There's the TTKs. Make of that what you will, but this is the single most important stat in my opinion. All right, so moving on, I want to just take a pause and say these guns are pretty well balanced, to be honest. There's no gun that is going to stand out by a ton, and there's no gun that is going to suck by a ton. I mean, I hate the Milano, and I love the MAC-10, but as you guys are going to see here, but the Milano is still decently viable. You can still get away with using it. And some people are going to suck with the MAC-10. And the MP5 is a really good middle ground gun. And so, you know, they balance this really well. And that's why we haven't seen tons of weapon balancing recently. Because all these SMGs are in a pretty average state. But here we go. Moving on with the firepower. Range. That's the range until there's a damage drop off. So for example, the MP5, maybe it's doing 25 damage after 25 HP. After this 10.16 meters, the Milano will do 35. AK-74U is 32. And so as you guys can see, this AK-74U has really, really bad range. And so you're probably not going to be able to beam people at distance. And this Bullfrog has a bad TTK, but it has a really good range. And so in between, you know, the AK-74U's 7.62 and the Bullfrog's 19.05, you're actually going to beat it even though it has a worse TTK. And so, yeah, if you guys want to use this SMG is kind of on a longer range map, but you still want to use an SMG, use the Bullfrog. If it's on a short range map like Nuketown, Hijacked, use the AK-74U because you're not going to come up against a ton of long line of sights. And now, finally, let's talk about bullet velocity. This is how much of a hit scan your gun is, or if they're super far away, how much do you have to lead them? And so these guns with bad bullet velocity are going to be bad at range as well. You know, this PPSH can have decent range, but it's got really bad bullet velocity, so you're not going to be able to actually hit those shots if your opponent is running, because you got to lead them a little bit more, a little bit tougher to hit. And so that's something to keep in mind here. The Bullfrog, once again, it's decent because it has decent bullet velocity and bad range. This AK-74U has bad range and really good bullet velocity. So that's why it kind of balances each other out. You can hit your shots at range even if they're moving quickly because you don't have to lead them as much and it's not going to be as hard. So you guys can look at this bullet velocity, compare it to the ranges. These two are kind of paired together because at higher ranges, you need better bullet velocity. And at lower ranges, you don't need that bullet velocity. All right, so moving on to speed. As you guys can see, all this movement speed, sprinting speed, shooting speed, they're all the exact same, so it doesn't matter there. The sprint to fire and ADS time, this is where the developers tried to make the Milano a little bit better, you know, balance it out a little bit more, but it's just not that big of a difference, honestly. This is 275, that's like what, 50 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds of a difference there in the ADS time, and likewise the AK-74U is 25 milliseconds worse than the rest of them. I mean, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. We're talking 40 milliseconds, and a lot of our pings vary between 20 and 100 milliseconds. And so, you know, these tiny millisecond differences aren't enough to balance out the Milano and the AK-74U. And so the Milano stays bad, the AK-74U stays decent. All right, so moving on to this accuracy. And as you guys can see here, I say the lower is better. You guys want low numbers here. So on this vertical recoil, this MAC-10, this AK-74U, this Milano, they're not great, but especially this MAC-10. As you guys can see from this base recoil, sheesh, that thing, it just flies up. And so this is from 5 meters away. That says 4.9, but I made sure to shoot at actually 5. I guess I just stepped forward for the screenshot. Anyways, that is a ton of recoil at 5 meters, and so that's hard to handle. The good news is on this gun that the horizontal recoil, which I think, in my opinion, matters more because you can just, you know, it's super easy just to press down on your controller, but when you have to press down and swing, it gets a lot harder. So that's a little bit more manageable. This horizontal recoil makes it really tough. So as we look at this KSP, you guys can see that I am holding in the same spot, and this from 5 meters away, this burst can go over here and over here. So that's enough to hit somebody at 5 meters, but if you're at 10 meters, that's going to miss a bullet. And as we talked about before, that's going to make this TTK the worst in the game. So that's what makes this KSP a little tough to deal with. As you guys can see, a gun with really good recoil, I would say, is the LC10. As you guys can see, it has the least horizontal recoil and pretty good vertical recoil. So as we look at it, I mean, you're hitting all your shots with a recoil like this. You have to hold your stick down the slightest amount. It's really not going to make that much of a difference. And that's why the LC10 beams, and that's why they took it out of league play, because I mean, it was pretty unfair compared to your AK-74Us because you could just beam at distance. Hip fire accuracy doesn't matter to me a ton. I don't use it as much, but also, I mean, look at that difference there. This is another one like the Milano. They tried to balance it out by giving it a good hip fire accuracy, but 6.5 to 7 to 7.5, these aren't huge differences right here. So you can hip fire with each of them. The Bullfrog, you'll notice, is a little bit worse. I noticed it while using it. So yeah, this doesn't matter as much. Pay the most attention to the horizontal recoil and then the vertical recoil. All right, so moving on to the last one, this ammo. I added this damage per mag in here. You can see it's italics, just like this TTK in here, which I added. Just thought it was really important to show that this OTS, because it has such a low starting mag size, its damage per mag is horrible, and so you're gonna have to be reloading a lot more than with the Bullfrog. I mean, it has the worst reload speed at 2.8 seconds, but you get a ton of damage out of it, so you don't need to reload as much. And so I would pair all of these together. I would look at all of them. You guys can see that the Bullfrog is really good. The OTS isn't as great, and then you get a good one such as the Milano, and so you get a lot of damage out of it. And a decently quick reload speed. And so, you know, Maybe they're balancing it out there, but just nothing changes the TTK. And we'll talk about that right now. All right, so before going into the meta guns, the good guns, and my recommended builds, I want to talk about each of these reds that you see here. And that is that you can change each one of them. You can change the AK-74U range. You can change this KSP horizontal recoil. You can change the MAC-10 recoil. You can change the Bullfrog reload speed. You can change the OTS mag size. So each one of these reds you can improve upon. You can use the right attachments that'll make it a meta gun. And you guys can change that to, guess what, a 40. And look at that. Now it's competing with all of these. You can change the sprint to fire to 300. And look at that. Now you got some greens in here and you can add some range. And so, you know, you can change each one of these reds to make it a better gun with the right attachments. Now, the only thing you cannot change is this TTK, which is the most important stat, as I said. And so this relies on the fire rate and damage. And you guys can say, but Noodler, there's an attachment with +6 damage. The Task Force barrel gives you +6 damage. Isn't that going to make a change? No, children, it's not going to make a difference. So I tested it, and +6 damage. It's not going to make a difference on any TTK. It's still the same amount of bullets to kill as before. The only time it'll make a difference is if, guess what? He didn't have 30. Your team shot him, and instead of 32 health, he had 33 health. And that one extra health is what made the kill. Guess what? That's so rare. That's not going to happen. 99% of the fights you guys are going to get into, they're going to have 150 damage, or, you know, not exactly exactly 1 HP more. And so this 6% increase in damage, don't pay attention to it when you guys are putting on attachments. That is not a difference maker in any SMG. Now, if they had chose to round up, this is actually like 29.5. If they had chose to round up for the PPSH and the OC8 or OTS9, guess what? That changes. With none of these other ones, it does. These are all the same. But they chose to round down. So the theoretical TTK does not change no matter what. So all these guns that you see, this Milano, you can't change the TTK, and that's what ruins the gun. All these other reds you can change. But once again, the TTK, the most important stat, you cannot change. Woof! All right. Oh, man, enough of that stats talk, Noodler. Get off of it. These are just numbers that you're showing me. All right, that's fair enough. So let's scroll over here, and let's talk about the feel. And so I ranked all these based on where they sit. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, move over, and here they are. You guys can see, technically, by the rankings, the AK-74U is the worst. The LC-10 and MAC-10 are the best. And so that can give you guys, you know, based on the rankings. But the only thing is there's things that are more important to us than others. For example, I don't care about hip fire. I really care about TTK. And so, you know, this is just another general view to look at, averaging every single stat on the same scale, which is the best and which is the worst. But what I care about more, scroll over so you guys can see a little bit better. There we go. Is I played with each gun a couple games each. And so I created what I say is what I feel score. I don't know if that's actually what I labeled it. Based on feel is what I said. And so this is just me going out, playing some games and saying, wow, this not based on these stats, but based on how I interpret it, this is how good each one of these guns are. And so I went back and forth with the stats. And yeah, here are my final findings. MAC-10, man, if you use the right attachments, if you just get that vertical recoil down, because once again, I mean, that's the only really bad thing about this. It doesn't have great bullet velocity either, I guess. Oops, right there. But if you use attachments to get the vertical recoil down and the bullet velocity up, it's going to melt people. A couple other great guns that I thought were the OTS-9. I'm going back on what I said before. You know, I said it was an average gun before, but after unlocking more and using it more and with the right attachments, it is a very good gun. I really like it. It's in my top 3. And then as we talked about a little bit before, the LC-10 just beams. It has very little recoil. You can hit every one of your shots. Decent fire rate. And so, yeah, it beams. And a special consideration to the AK-74U. It felt decent. It's got the worst score here, but there's a reason that all the pros use it. It's because it's a pretty decent gun. So I'm going to focus on these 3, the LC-10, the MAC-10, and the OTS-9, which I think are the best 3 guns in the game. And I'm going to build them out for you guys. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about these stats and what you guys think about this this feel. What do you guys think that the feel is on each of these guns? But let's get into the attachments. All right, one more thing before we go on actually is here are my notes on each one of these guns while I was playing, what I noticed and what I thought about each one of these. And so, yeah, you guys can go through it. We're not going to read each one, but there's all my notes on any of them if you guys want to know my specific thoughts, my brief specific thoughts on each one of these guns. Now, let's get into these meta guns. All right, so here we go. Let's build out these guns. As I mentioned, my top three would be the MAC-10 primarily, and then my next two would be the OTS-9 and the LC-10. And so we're going to flip back and forth between the stats and building it out. The MAC-10, as you guys can see, has very poor bullet velocity and very poor vertical recoil control. And this is what really makes it difficult, but also we want to bump up that bullet velocity. And so we're going to focus our stats or our attachments on those two, making those two things better. And so let's go to the MAC-10. If you guys have the Gallantry blueprint, I believe it was Season 1 Battle Pass, use it because the iron sights are a little bit better. It's got a little skinnier thing, but if you don't have it, it's not going to kill you. Take off all these because forget those. And let's start on it. As you guys know, you need a suppressor in multiplayer. Sound suppressor, agency suppressor. Guess what? Agency suppressor gives us this 7% vertical recoil control. It's going to cut down on our range a bit, but we'll discuss later why that's okay. So we want that vertical recoil control. Next, we're going to go with these barrels. Task Force is normally a good shout, even though we discussed this damage doesn't do anything. But this recoil control is out of control with it. And so we're going to go with either the 6.1 Reinforced Heavy and the 5.3 Ranger. Normally, I think I'd go with the Reinforced Heavy, but with an SMG, I don't like the loss on sprinting movement speed. And so we're going to go with the Ranger. Next, we're going to go with this Field Agent Grip. It's not as good at as the horizontal or as the vertical recoil. This only has 8%. As this has 10%, so slightly better. But it cuts down on all your movement speed. And as I discussed with an SMG, you want to be able to move around the map quickly. And so that extra 2% vertical recoil control, not worth it. And so we're going to stick with the Field Agent Grip. Next is the mag. You can go 43 or 53. I don't want my 8mm sight cut down, so I'm going to go with 43. It's got a decent reload speed, so that's fine. And then finally, with the handle, we're going to go with the airborne elastic. It's going to hurt your sprint to fire, but it'll give you a really good ADS time and aim while going prone. And so actually with that, you could also go with the 53 because you get such a bonus on this. We're going to stick with 43 though, so it improves it a ton. So that's my build on the MAC-10. We're going to go agency suppressor, 5.3 Ranger, Field Agent Grip, 43 round drum, and the airborne elastic wrap. So there's your final MAC-10 build. This thing, the bullet velocity is great. The iron sights look great. You guys are going to get, you know, decent vertical recoil control, and it has the second best TTK behind the KSP, in which we discussed that KSP. It's a theoretical TTK, and you won't get that very much. The only thing that is hurt is the range, but with high vertical recoil, the range doesn't matter as much because you're not going to be able to hit the shots at range anyways. And so, yeah, this thing just becomes a melting machine. It is for sure my favorite gun to use, specifically because of the TTK movement speed. It's got everything. And so, yeah, I love this MAC-10. It's what I recommend. And yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about this OTS-9. And this makes it a little bit more difficult to put on attachments because, as you guys can see, it's an average gun all around. You know, it's got slightly decent fire rates. But the only thing it really needs is the starting mag size, so we know we need to put a magazine on it. And so besides that, you know, what are you going to focus on? Well, you're going to focus on the things that make all guns bigger or better in general. And so these are going to be really general attachments. But after putting on these general attachments, it makes it a really good gun. You know, last video I talked about how it was an average gun, but after putting on these attachments, it makes it a really good all-around gun. And so I really enjoy it. So moving in here, let's go to this OTS-9. We're going to start off, you guys know that we need a suppressor, and so we're going to start off with this GRU suppressor. It's got okay range already, and so I'm okay with this added damage range. It goes from 15 to 25. It's got better vertical recoil, which we're going to need for this next attachment. This next attachment is going to be the Task Force. We just said on the MAC-10 that the Task Force hurts the vertical recoil too much to use it. Well, the OTS-9 has decent recoil to start, and so, you know, we can hurt it by improving the damage range so much and the bullet velocity, so we're going to use it there. Next, to offset that a little bit no more, we're going to go with the Spetsnaz script. You know, we just talked about how it hurt vertical and horizontal recoil so much. Well, here's something that's going to offset it. There we go. Mag, we know we need a huge mag, so while I normally recommend this first one, it starts with 20, so we're going to have to go with the second one, and this is going to hurt the ADS time. We'll improve it with the very next attachment. But yeah, 40 round drum is definitely necessary for this gun. And then finally, like I said, you got to improve that ADS because we just heard it. The sprint to fire is going to be a little worse. But yeah, that's my build. Cruise suppressor, task force, Spetsnaz, 40 round drum, and then Gru elastic wrap. And like I discussed before, this is gonna make it a great all-around gun. You know, you're not gonna experience any of the bad TTK or the bad range or the bad bullet or the bad mag anymore. You know, it's a great all-around gun now, thanks to those attachments. And so I really enjoyed using this a lot more than I enjoyed at the very beginning with this 20 round drum. And so I'm glad I gave it another chance after that last video, even though I just spent so long using it. Yep, definitely recommend the OTS-9. All right, and now finally this LC-10. As we talked about before, it's a beam. It's got really good recoil along with the PPSH, but its TTK is slightly better. Its bullet velocity is way better, and so it makes it a lot better of a gun. As you guys can see here, no real red items. Only one is the sprint to fire, but that's every single one because the Milano is so good. If we take that off, it's all even. It should be all the same color, but whatever. So this LC-10, it doesn't really suffer in anything. The only thing is the TTK, but with its shooting straight, it's fine. And so once again, it's going to be pretty general attachments. So as we move on to it, we're going to start, I think it's the exact same attachments. Oh no, one different. We're going to go with the sound suppressor over the agency suppressor because we want to improve this range. The recoil doesn't matter as much, the 7% vertical recoil, because it's already got great recoil. And so let's go with the sound suppressor so we don't hurt the range as much. Next, we're going to go with the task force barrel because, you know, the recoil doesn't matter as much. We're about to use another attachment that'll balance this out a little bit, and it'll give us great damage range and bullet velocity. Like I said, we're just going to use this field agent grip. It's going to give us good recoil control. You know, I've mentioned that this is a low recoil gun, but with the task force barrel, it can kind of get out of hand if you don't use this. And so I definitely recommend using the field agent grip. I actually clicked the wrong one there. Next, 45 round drum. You can use a 50 round drum, but same thing with the Mac 10. I don't want to hurt that aim down sight. I want a really good aim down sight with my SMGs. 45 round drum. And then finally, we're going to help the ADS time even more. Give the aim down sight while going prone. So it's a really similar build to the last two. You know, all builds are pretty similar, but a little bit different. For example, this has a sound suppressor. The other one has an agency suppressor. The Mac 10, we didn't use the task force barrel. So a little bit different there. And yep, there is my LC-10 build. Sound suppressor, task force barrel, field agent grip, 45 round drum, and airborne elastic wrap. And so just like before, this gun is still a beam. It's still got really good, really manageable recoil, but now it's got even better range and even better bullet velocity. The bullet velocity, as we'll see here in a sec, is ridiculous. And so it turns into a really good, really manageable gun. And so I definitely recommend still using this LC-10. All right, so there you go. Here are the final stats with the builds for the LC-10, the Mac 10, and the OTS-9. As you guys can see, for the Mac 10, the range is poor, but because it has such high vertical recoil, you know, it's tough to beam people at range anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But this vertical recoil is controllable, having said that, because you can just hold down on this stick, and it's easy to control because it has such low horizontal recoil as well. Moving on to the OTS-9, its recoil is a little bit higher, but besides that, it's a great overall gun. The bullet velocity is really good. If we forget about the LC-10, it actually has the best in the class now. Range is very good. If you forget about the LC-10, upgrade to LC-10, and now the Bullfrog and now the LC-10, it's got the best range. And so it's a really good overall gun with a little bit higher of recoil. So definitely recommend using that. And then finally, we got this LC-10 that we talked about last. The best bullet velocity. You're going to beam people. It's going to be hit scan on nearly every line of sight in the game. And with low recoil, it's got a little bit higher vertical recoil now, but still, you want low horizontal recoil more than vertical recoil. You can still beam people. Its range is ridiculous. Its bullet velocity is ridiculous. It has great ADS, low recoil, decent mag. I mean, it is a great gun. So I'd probably rank Mac 10 is my number one, very closely behind LC-10, and then my third would be OTS-9, and those are my top three. Let me know what you guys think. Once again, those don't have other attachments. This is the general base stats of all of them. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comments of all these different guns. Did I miss one? You know, did my ranking over here, did my feel not agree with you guys? Do you guys think that I messed up on one and that I'm not feeling one right? You know, let me know down in the comments below, and let me know if I need to build out another one of your guns or try it again. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Peace!